What is this podcast? I am Dave, and with me, as always, is my man Gene.
Yo.
And how you been, Gene?
Been okay, man. I'm upright, so I'm blessed.
Yeah, still alive. So what's been up? How's everything going?
We're definitely we're seeing some progress as far as the episodes go. I'm still on episode 2. A lot of the time has been spent on the design of the layout. Because the first episode we were very limited as far as what I could do. We only had video feed. It displayed whoever was speaking. So I was very, like I said, very limited as far as what I could do with the design. But now that I have our individual video feeds, then I have some leg room to really, do a few things. So, a lot of the time has been spent designing it. I did edit the video, but I had to figure out the workflow. So, I might have to go back and redo the video edits, but it's coming along. We're figuring
awesome. It out. And that's coming along is best progress. Thing to hear right now.
Yeah, progress.
And for people so this will probably be episode 4 if we're releasing it like that. And it's just funny how we're talking about this. Like when people are seeing it from episode 1 on, they're sort of like, I just think that's really funny how the people, the future people are way ahead of us right now.
Hey, this is how it's working this new day and age.
Exactly. And so on my end, I got the Podbean up and running.
Cool.
In terms of switching to premium, and I got our picture up on there and the logo, and I made sure the website looked decent for what they have.
Perfect, man.
And yeah, so as soon as we bust out when we decide to publish the first episode, I'll make sure it gets out to Apple and gets out to and Spotify and all the places that podcasts
for sure
go.
We actually might want to. It's going to take a couple of days, especially for Apple, for them to approve.
Right.
So whenever we do decide to actually publish it, we should make it a point to distribute it through Podbean a couple of days prior.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I found out that's just what you do, because I released a song a couple months ago and I misread a thing, and I thought it would come out the day that I published it, and it didn't come out until a week later.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of annoying.
That's how these things work. Yeah.
But so you mentioned the word workflow when you were talking a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of touches on what we're here to talk about today is, the systems in place that we're using to ensure that, everything gets done on both your end and my end.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about,
Basically, we need a system in place.
Right.
We're going to discover that there are a set of repetitive tasks, right? So it'd be smart to be mindful of these tasks and figure out how to better make ourselves efficient over time, rather than like haphazardly just kind of, piecing together episodes. You know what I mean? Like, I think we got to be mindful of the design of the machine that we're building right now, right? Especially, I eventually want to get to the point where we have the capacity, not just you and I, but we build a team where we can crank out a lot of content, right?
Right.
And once you start, once you get to that point, you got to be efficient. You know what I mean? You got to be mindful of the workflow and to take out any of the steps that are unnecessary.
Right. Just because we don't want to, because like you said, once we get this going, anything that's going to impede us getting once we're set up on release dates and times and anything that's going to get in the way is just bad.
It's just in the way. Yeah. It's just in the way. There are like obvious things right now. Like, once we record the episodes, you and I may, kind of discuss what just happened and the learnings we've gotten from it. From there, you send me the files immediately. And And I kind of, because I like to do things in batches, right? So
Right.
and that's kind of like the first batch, and whenever I pick it back up, the next batch is to kind of set up the episode within, Premiere. And that's another batch, and then the next session will be actually editing and chopping things up. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like the workflow that I've been kind of using right now.
Right.
And once we start releasing episodes, then we're going to incorporate things like, graphic designs for each episode, and how we distribute and how we time the distribution of the episodes, and show notes and etc.
Right. And I think that sort of, because you sort of, like you said, we record and then I hand it off to you. And then
Yep.
from what we've talked about, it's sort of like once you're done with the editing, then it's really where my job comes back in to
Yep.
try to get, looking into transcription, getting that done,
Yep.
make sure the show notes are done,
Sure.
probably, uploading it to Podbean.
Yep.
And doing all that and make sure it goes out. So it's sort of like right now, that's, as a 2-man operation, that's, it's pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, these are the things we just need to be mindful of as we kind of walk this journey. So yeah, I mean, that's it. That's just, the systems in a nutshell.
Right. And, I think but it's very easy, in things that we've done in the past. It's just easy to sort of like, like once we're done, especially on my end, I know that, if too much time goes by, so once we're done, I consolidate my audio, wait for the video to be done, doing its thing.
Yep.
And then I have to, convert it to a WAV file and then put it all into a file and send it into the Google Doc and send it to you.
Yeah.
And depending on how long the episode is, like that can take time. And the problem
sure.
I run into on my end is that if too much time goes by, I'm screwed, because then it's sort of like trying to get back and like, oh, I got to remember to send that out.
Yeah.
And I gotta, do this. And then if
Yeah.
I'm behind, then you're behind, then we're behind.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, I think, because we had a podcast that we did previously, and I think a big reason why that sort of broke down was me not sending files on time.
Yeah. And your life was kind of on fire too.
Right. Yeah. There was a lot of, external things going on. But still, I would say, like, I'd say there were other factors, but like that was a big factor.
For sure.
And it sort of
breaking
down.
Disciplined. Yeah, we need to be disciplined and be mindful of the systems and just know what's required and expected of us. You know what I mean? And to hold each other accountable when those expectations aren't met.
Right. And I think that's, I feel like with a lot of people, that's probably, where a big problem comes in is like, these systems don't work without accountability.
Yeah.
And in that, like, we had a discussion where it's like, we can't be afraid. Like, nothing you're going to say to me, I have to understand that anything you're saying to me in sort of like a negative way is not to be a dick. It's really just like, this is to help us out. Like, your Slack, and then vice versa with me, with you. Like, I would hope you understand 100%. That if I'm coming at you with something, it's just
100%.
Like, not trying to disrespect you or be like,
and like, and on an intellectual level, that sounds like the ideal situation, but like, we're emotional creatures, you know what I mean, and our feelings get hurt, and conflict is uncomfortable, right? You and I are both very passive people, and we're not very confrontational,
right?
And it's one thing to take criticism and to be critiqued. It's another thing to criticize somebody else, and it's even more uncomfortable.
Right. I mean, I have a hard time doing that, because usually I'll just be like, oh no, it's okay, whatever. I'll deal with it, whatever. And like, I think in doing a creative endeavor, I think that's bad. It's just bad. And and the problem with creative people is they're very, like, a theme that is sort of run through a lot of these episodes that we're doing so far is feelings and facts, and and taking criticism, you know, that's come up a couple of times. And creative people, I don't think always take criticism, even constructive criticism, very well, just because I think
we're sensitive.
Right. Creative people are very sensitive creatures.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, you have to be very, like, even in my own life, that's something I've been just very mindful of in the last few weeks, just in terms of a few months, and just in terms of everything in my life, is just being mindful that, you know, nobody's out to fucking get me, and not in like a super paranoia kind of way, but like, nobody close to me is actively trying to rip me down to be a dick. You know what I mean?
But intellectually you understand that, but
right. And then in practice, that's the constant struggle, is reminding myself of that. It's a constant reminder, just like, no, Dave, don't overthink this. What they said is, if they literally mean what they said to you, there's no 7 layers of Dave's a piece of shit that you have to wade through to get to what they're saying.
You know, and the only way you're going to overcome that is just through repetition. You know what I mean?
Right.
Put yourself in an environment where, you know, you're going to have to deal with these things that you struggle with. And, you know, over time, you will adjust and you will adapt. And, you know, hopefully you'll reach a point where you can't even think about even going back to like the whole passive and indirect way of doing things, because it's just not productive.
Right. And I think the thing is that once we get busy enough, for both of us, it's going to be impossible to sort of get back to sort of fall. Like, I want to get to the point where we're so busy that's impossible for us to become passive about this, because there's just too much on the line.
Too much. Yeah, there's too much at stake. So like, and it's important for us to kind of be mindful of these things, so we can kind of set the culture and design the culture now. Because, you know, eventually, if this does grow, you know, the team will grow as well.
Right.
You know, like, they kind of know going in what is expected and the kind of environment that they are going to operate in.
Right. Because, and we can't be, you know, it's just, you know, everything's about communication. And like, if we're not clear bosses or leaders, then the whole fucking system breaks down. And that system starts with what we're doing right now. So like, even if the team, whatever team does come in, like, we can even just say, look, we've set this up. If you've watched any of our episodes, you should know what we're about. And, you know, and that's for anybody out there trying to start a podcast. Like, this is, you know, it's not an easy thing to be, you know, a couple voices in a sea of millions of voices. You know what I mean? So it's like, you're not going to get there unless you keep going. And, you know, I just feel like,
bottom line,
it's just so easy to just be like, all right, well, it's like that, it's going to take an hour, so I'll get to it in like an hour. And then an hour goes by and it's like, well, now I gotta, like, you know, do this, so I'll get to it in another hour. And then it's 4 days later and you're like, oh shit. And
it's a constant battle that you have with yourself.
Right. And I mean, would you agree that that's probably a big problem with most creative types?
Yeah, I mean, that's well, here's the thing, and this is my theory on creative people, right? We thrive in the chaos, right?
Yes.
We have the ability to operate in the nebula of possibility, of potential, right?
Yes.
So things haven't congealed yet. There's nothing solid, nothing has formed, right? We thrive in the formless. But here's the thing: in our economy, there needs to be structure that is in place around the creativity in order to create value from it. And that's, you know, that's where we fall short, because we're lateral thinkers, right? We operate in multiple silos, is the way that I can best describe it. You know what I mean? Like, in a realm where two contradictory ideas can work. You know, I know that's very abstract, but like,
but I think it's spot on.
Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just like we constantly live, as far as our thinking, like, it's a constant paradox, right? It doesn't really make sense, but it makes sense at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, you know, a person can can create an ingenious piece of work,
Mhm.
but they can't balance the, you know what I mean? Like, or time keeping an apartment clean, or just your daily tasks that a normal person would take for granted. A creative really struggles with,
Right.
That's our issue. You know what I mean? Our crew, our network is a collection of creative people. You know what I mean? And getting them to follow a common goal, and it's like herding cats. You know what I mean? You have a really hard time getting people together as a unified front, and that's the challenge that we faced.
Yeah. And I mean, the pandemic doesn't make that any easier, because at the time of recording, like, the pandemic is still going on.
Yeah.
And then, it makes it even harder to get, but through the grace of technology,
Thank
we're here to
God.
do that. And and I think that's you really just sort of nailed it, because structure, to some, I feel like structure is sort of the enemy of creativity.
100%.
Because I just, in my personal life, like, everything you just said is so just spot on, because
Yeah.
I get caught up in thinking of what could be, what will be,
Yeah.
these ideas. Like, I have 20 years of ideas
Yeah.
that are just still percolating in my brain that I'm just
Yeah.
not committing to.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, once it becomes real, once you commit to it and you put it down, it becomes real. And then there's like a real fear in that. Like, once
Yeah.
you've made the thing real, because then you're sort of committed to it.
Yeah. And you're held accountable to it,
Right.
and and one thing about creative people that most would hesitate to admit is that we're extremely insecure.
Yes.
Right. Our whatever creative piece we come up with, we can't help but feel like it's part of our identity.
Yes.
And if it's criticized or critiqued or perceived as low quality, we can't help but kind of perceive that as a reflection of us.
Right.
It's a weird thing.
Yeah, because I mean, it, in a lot of ways, it is, because it's like your time and your emotion and your energy went into this thing. So the minute somebody's just like, it's not that good.
Yeah.
You're just like, well, then my time and my energy and I am useless. And like, that's sort of the negative
tough thing.
loop of,
that's a tough thing.
I definitely think there are artists out there who, can be very structured, and like, there are times where, in making sort of some stuff, I like to put a structure there, but it's to break the structure.
Yeah.
Like, it's sort of like knowing the rules to break the rules. And in that, it's structureless. Like, it becomes like knowing the structure to have no structure is sort of like, again, sort of paradox of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing about, the best artists, after much time of developing their craft, will realize that one of the most important things that you can put in place are creative constraints, right? These guardrails to kind of operate in. Because like I said earlier, we operate in this nebula of potential and chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, gravity has to take form somehow in order for the kind of congeal and form. You know what I'm saying? So those constraints, cut down the options so you don't go crazy with whatever it is that you're trying to create.
Right. I think you and I had a discussion recently about music theory, and how I was saying I needed to learn more about music theory, and you were saying, like, it doesn't really matter because of those rules. It's like,
Yeah, it's a weird thing, because it's a paradox, because I will say, learning, studying music theory is one of the best things I've ever done as far as my creativity goes. But it took me, after years of learning it, it took me years of getting away from music in order for me to no longer be as mindful of the theory as I'm trying to create the thing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
When I'm creating, because it's like your mind can only fixate on one thing at a time. And like, if I'm jamming, like back when we were, in our band, if I'm trying to think of theory as I'm trying to create in the moment, it takes away from the moment. You know what I mean? So, that was kind of the issues that I'm just so technical. Like there's always a quote unquote right way of doing things when there really isn't, you know?
Right. But not to be repetitive, once you do it's like you need the systems to understand what not to do.
Yeah.
And then, it's just, it's all about the systems that you have in place to get you to the next spot, because, as much as.
And that's why I think it's important that we're mindful of this, and out the gate. You know what I mean? So like that, the idea, and the system itself can get a chance to actually grow and evolve. But here's the thing: this is what ultimately we need to do. And this is the God's honest truth, right? I'm not going to sit here and pretend we are 30 plus. You know what I mean? I'm on the later part of my 30s. Like there are certain things that I'm just not good at.
Sure.
Period.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And for me to, really try to hone in the skills of the area that I'm not strong at, especially at this stage of the game, I feel is would be unproductive. So I think recruiting people who are good in the areas where we're weak is key. And I actually haven't mentioned this to you yet, but I spent time yesterday with a woman named Tracy. I don't know if you ever met Botch, but it's Botch's fiance.
No.
Right? Botch is like, another one of our friends in our creative circle. And, I've known Tracy for a little bit now. And her background is she ran a law firm. She was a paralegal before all the world went to hell. So that right there tells you she has a lot of organizational skills, and she has a very and she's trained in research and how to research, right? So I had a conversation with her, and we were just kind of kicking, and like I felt like I saw her for the first time. Like, wait a minute, like, why don't we set up a record label and have you run it, right? And that can go for the same thing. That could be for the for Third Strand as well. You know what I mean? Just have somebody whose sole function is to organize.
Yes.
And organize us, and to basically essentially be a project manager to make sure that everything, all the ducks are set up in a row, and when we knock them down when it's time for us to achieve our goals.
Right. It's someone to hold us accountable.
Yeah. So, I'm actually going to be spending time with her on Monday. Today is Wednesday. Mm-hmm. So next week, I'm pretty much going to spend the day with her and Botch, you know what I mean? And we're going to kind of do a lot of research, have some discussions, and figure out how to utilize her skill set. So, we can kind of relieve ourselves of all that bullshit.
Mm. Now, is that, would we be bringing her in on this as well?
That's the plan. I mean, like, I'm still feeling her out. The initial idea was the record label thing. You know what I mean? Because, with Third Strand, we have the production piece, the content creation piece. With the record label, that can just focus on the business aspects. You know what I mean? From the royalties to the publishing of music. But like really, most importantly, for the next month, if she agrees to this, I would direct her energies to research and really break down the industry altogether. So we actually know how things work, how money is exchanged, and how we can embed ourselves, in order, or place ourselves for at least to get an opportunity to, make money or,
right.
potentially make a living off of this, So we got to really be realistic. You know what I mean? Like we've been living this pipe dream, and like, we have that old model thinking where we're going to get discovered someday. Well, no one's discovering us.
Right.
I mean, so, we have too much talent as a collective to not, channel that energy and, potentially make something of it,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and that's the thing. It's like, nobody's going to discover us. So we have to make ourselves discoverable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's the only way to do it. Like the only way to do it is to push yourself.
Yeah. And you don't need to be discovered, man. You know what I mean? Like we have all the tools. Like I mentioned on the podcast, like there's very little barriers to entry.
Right.
We can literally make a media conglomerate within 5 years if things goes right. You know, that's
Right. But that's what
the
you
reality.
and that's what you and I have been talking about. Like this podcast is sort of
Yeah.
in my mind is like the launching point for Third Strand, and then my sort of like the things that I want to do under that
Yeah.
label with like
Yeah.
my all hell shit, which we've talked about, which is whatever, that doesn't have to be a part of it, but just
I know what you mean. So like, but here's the thing: we got to do this right. We can do
right,
this,
exactly.
right. Set up systems, actually create a thing that becomes a thing, and all we have that kind of creates the foundation.
Absolutely.
Build them blocks in order to add on
Right.
whatever we need to add on. And if we come up with something quality, people will come. You build it, they
Right.
will come. You know what I mean? People are like, oh, you have this going on. This is what I have to offer,
Right. Right. And as long and when I mean make ourselves discoverable, I don't mean to the man. I mean to the people.
100%.
Because like the people aren't discovering us because we're not doing anything.
100%.
Like we've made so much shit and then it just sort of languishes on our hard drives. And then when we do push it out, like it goes to like my Facebook feed, and that's like, other than like, my family members, that's, it dead stops there. It doesn't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
So we need, so I mean, we need to create the systems and then find the team to help implement the systems, and then that's where we're gonna fucking succeed.
Yeah. Because we know how to create what we know how to create, right? We're creators, right? Next challenge is to create a structure around our creativity, and on top of that, in order to elevate ourselves a level above that, is to figure out how to organize people.
Mm-hmm.
Once we are able to do that effectively, then the sky's the limits.
Right. So structures, systems, creativity.
Yeah.
It's all just one big paradox. But it's all necessary.
Yeah, it's like eating your vegetables, right? You don't want to do it. You want to get straight to the dessert, but if you don't eat your vegetables over time, you will pay for it.
Yeah, if you don't build that muscle, you're not going anywhere.
It's bottom line.
So yeah, I'd say, I don't know, you have anything else to add on to that?
Nah, man, I think we pretty much covered it.
Yeah, hell yeah. All right, so thanks everybody.
I will say that I will add one more thing.
Yes.
I think the next things that we can work on is we could do a better job preparing for the podcast. Like this podcast was definitely on the whim.
Yeah.
And I was on preparing for it more than I did, but I got caught up on another project. That happens,
Right.
But I think it's one extra, I guess, component of our system is to figure out how to better prepare for these podcasts to set ourselves up for a better conversation. Not to say that this was a bad conversation, but
no, I'd say this is a pretty good conversation. But
yeah.
I completely agree. We both need to come a lot more prepared.
Yeah.
In what we're doing.
Yes, sir. That's it for me.
Yeah, but so yeah, thanks everybody for again joining us on this journey of us figuring out what is this podcast.
Yeah.
And as always, I am Dave, and
I'm
across
Gene.
from me is Gene.
I'll check y'all out later. Take care.
Peace.